Eric Townsend. I've had the great pleasure of knowing Eric for many years. We talk about something that he's passionate about jumping the curve, getting to that next level. He does a lot of planning, life planning, a lot of coaching. He's read so many books. I met him when he was at Intel. He's not there now. He's going to another position, another company soon. But the 5 areas: vocation, community, family, personal, faith. Where are you in all of those areas? He's an avid golfer like I am, so I like to draw parallels. So I ask him about kind of how jumping the curve into these areas is similar to playing golf and having the discipline to get lessons in golf, how to approach a round, etc. It's a really interesting conversation, and we go off in lots of business areas, difference between managers and leaders, and he talks about having a board of directors. I wonder if you're familiar with this concept, just personally in life, not in business. If I were to ask you, who are your board of directors? Who do you go to for this, or this? What would your answer be? Do you have a mentor? I do ask him, how does one go about getting one? And what are their responsibilities? Really interesting conversation with Eric. I enjoy it. I know you will as well. Thanks for listening. Hi, I'm Joey Pinz. People ask me, how did I lose 130 pounds? The quick answer is always discipline. I started my business, wasn't paying attention to my health, was eating too much, drinking too much sweets. My daughter was born. Next thing I know, I'm pre-diabetic, I have hypertension. I knew something had to change. Discipline. I, like many of you, have faced many challenges in your career, in your family, in your life, in your faith. How did you attack them? How did you approach them? How did you solve them, hopefully? It all had to have some degree of discipline. I'm also asked, how did you found and start a tech business that lasted over 25 years? Discipline. I was committed to it, enjoyed technology, didn't enjoy some aspects of it, but knew it was necessary. Discipline. Our podcast mission: how do we use discipline to better ourselves and society? Join me, please, as I talk to interesting people and discuss how they use discipline in their family and their passion and their careers and how it helped them. Our podcast vision: growth through learning from others. Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations. It'll be light and serious. Join us, please. Thank you for consideration. Hey, Eric Townsend, I'm very, very excited to talk to you. Thanks so much for your time today.
Yeah.
How can we relate jumping the curve and playing a round of golf?
It's funny, Joe, when I think about jumping a curve, it's kind of like the first time that you get below 80. That first time someone's 79 and they're like,
break 80.
Right? And you're like, or that time where like all of a sudden someone goes, well, how many greens regulations you have? And you're like, what? I'm sorry, you track that? Oh yeah. And then you start. So what I tell you is because like when someone jumps a curve, they got to go through an evolution of like, okay, learning about, okay, when someone first plays golf, they're just excited. They have energy. They're just swinging away, right? And then all of a sudden, someone goes, "What'd you score?" And they go, I was out just great." And they're like, "Did you shoot below 100?" All of a sudden, we have a bar that's been set, right? Like,
Yeah.
okay, what does good look like? Is it, or what's? I always say, like, what are we building towards? And then people, they start going, "Okay, man. Well, for me to really get to where I'm going to go, I need to maybe get like a coach or someone or a swing person." And then once I'm starting to play well, like how can I like bring other people into that? So how I apply it to golf and jump a curve is it like once you get okay, there's the 100, and then everyone talks about the 90s. But once you go to like you're getting the 70s, all of a sudden you now know, okay, man, I've already built to what good is, right? I've got the right things in place, whether it's my gear, whether I've got a hitting coach, whether I'm watching a podcast. But now it's okay, like what am I gonna do with this whole golf thing I'm good at now? Am I gonna build better relationships with it? I'm not gonna be on tour, right? There's not gonna be like a sign that says Townsend on it, right? But like, what am I gonna do to really help? And I mean, I've seen Joe do some people do some great things where they all of a sudden they go teach kids on it. They're in business conversations talking to people about it. I even know some pro golfers, and it's interesting because one of the best golfers of all time said, when you play golf, it's just a really good walk that you're having
Mm,
on a
mm.
it's on the grass. That's when it's really good. If you get too much caught up in it, you're missing that. And he's like, technically, you just need one good putt, one good drive, one good approach shot, and then you're having a great day of golf.
Mm.
So, but you got to jump the curve to get to that, right? Because in the beginning you're just running around, right? And then you're coming up that curve, going, I got to get to 80, got to get to 70. But when you're up here, you start to go, okay, really, what is it? And all of a sudden you look over and you're like, what's that? And then you jump the curve, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay. Now there's probably other people who are going to go through this. How can I make sure I'm bringing them along on that?
Yeah, we find that in golf, there's so many different levels. I mean, I play golf with some people that shoot in the 90s and have the
Yeah,
time of their life. And by the way,
yeah,
they're playing fast. I mean, high scores is very acceptable. Slow golf is what is
mm,
unacceptable,
mm,
right?
mm,
So,
mm,
but still, they realize where they are. They enjoy their handicap position. They
yeah,
try to get better. They take some lessons sometimes. Sometimes they don't. But I
yeah.
guess that's the beauty of it. And so, with level jumping, is there a right way to do it? Can anybody just do it their own way with jumping the curve?
Yeah, I think when you're because I look at it, so Joe, that take a step back, right? And jump on the curve. There's multiple curves we have in life, right? So we're kind of looking on the personal one. So us as individuals, okay, things I like to do, my hobbies or my health or those type of things. But there's also the ones around in my community, what I'm doing there, what I'm doing as far as maybe like my family, what I'm doing maybe like in my job life, even like if people have a spiritual side, what's that like? And I think
Faith, yeah.
what we get caught up on is we get caught in one curve
Hmm.
and we're like trying to move up that one, but we got like 168 hours in a week, right? So technically, we got a lot of time. Now, some people literally, I have buddies of mine that like will spend all their time on one curve, whether it's, on the job, or I have phenomenal women I know, and also men, they're single mom and dads, and they spend all their time on that curve, right? And you can,
Mm.
I'm not saying you can't, but then you start taking steps back where you start saying, okay, well, what am I doing on that curve, and then am I actually seeing where that next jump is, right? Because we all have it, right? I mean, I think sometimes there's those big. I'm a Gallup strength guy, right? So in Gallup, we always talk about that when you have major changes in your life, there's usually five things that impact that change, right? So you have near-death experience, you go through a divorce, change in religion, right? Those are kind of the big three. There's a couple after that, but I will tell you that people they when you have those big movements, we call them, or turning points, that's where all of a sudden you'll pause for a second, and you'll look at other curves. And it may not be
Hmm.
one you're on. You may be on like someone else that you may know, and this happens a lot. Of people like they'll go to a funeral and they'll be hearing about someone else's their life, and they'll hear about other curves. Someone's like, "Wow, that's kind of cool. Like, how did they know that there was like this whole thing around whatever?" At a recent funeral, and someone did phenomenal work in Arizona foster care, and she was known. There was all these kids there, and I'm like, man, she had a lot of kids. There's a crap ton of kids here, and all of a
Wow.
sudden it wasn't her. It was I'm like, they're all her kids. Oh yeah, and I'm like, I've never seen anyone make that many babies in my life. And they all
Mhm.
got up there, start time. You're like, man, like, yeah. So I think it's that part of when you're talking about jumping the curve. I always say curves because we do sometimes focus on one. Like a lot of listeners here are maybe in the IT industry, maybe other place, other industries, and they're just really good at that. And I always say that's one, right? Your other curve, the family one, they may be staring at you going, cool. How can you, you know, become the best of that?
We often talk about Eric,
Yeah.
when I was in HTG and
Yeah.
involved, we always talk about life work balance.
Mm,
You
mm,
have to, you're
mm.
working way too much. I was very much guilty of that at one point. But you want to take it to kind of five different areas. You
Oh yeah.
mentioned vocations, your work, your community, your family, your personal, and then faith or
Yeah.
your spirituality. Those are kind of
Yeah.
five areas. So
Yeah.
it's much more than just life work.
Yeah, and I tell you, like, so this is where, and Joe, this is the Patterson Center. They have a thing called Life Plan Startup. That's it. All came from that. So this is not an Eric, I would say, but like those five domains of life, we call them, very very key, right? I mean, and a lot of leaders that I work with and talk with, and um, we're not always aware that there are those five there, right? I always make a when I'm talking to someone about them, it's like I almost sometimes consider them domains, but I consider them holes sometimes.
Mm,
Right? We get down a certain hole and we don't know. We're just so used to look at that around us, right? We're like,
mm, mm.
I mean, and it's interesting because sometimes will also say, "Oh, well, technically, my vocation is my family. Everyone who works my family."
Mm.
You're like, okay, but how about when you leave to go home? Oh, I've got a couple kids. Yeah, got a wife. And it's like, well, what? How about them? What do you? What's give me two bucket list items you have with your wife. Well, we've got an event coming up for work, so we're going to Orlando, and we're going to go to Disney for like 5 days. I'm like,
Nice.
not tied to work stuff, and they're like in the past, or what do you? And so but I think
Mm.
it's that part, so that like I always say that the hardest part, and I'm fortunate. I work great people like you, like in the vocational domain, but I like have another person named Cindy that's in the community domain. She is awesome. No one even She's a phenomenal leader. Her and I help lead a homeless ministry, right? And I always say, like, when people are there, they're in that part of the curve where they get there and they're excited and they're just, how can I help? And I always say the hardest thing you're gonna do here, the hardest. And there's like we have hundreds of volunteers helping, serving all people, but it's the hardest part. And don't miss it. Like in 5 or 10 minutes, you're gonna be helping. But I said, is you need to be here.
Mm.
Don't do
Present.
here, right? It's You were called a human being, not a human doing. And I
Mm.
said, you're gonna all of a sudden 10 minutes from now, you're gonna be out serving, you're gonna be giving clothes, and you're gonna be so excited, you're gonna be like, and you're gonna run around, but you're gonna miss that person in front of you that wants to sit with you. And we have this with clients too, like, okay, hey, there's a big breach. Okay, let's figure it out. Let's sit back and say, okay, as them as a leader, what are they dealing with right now with their employee? Like their employees, they haven't, their employees haven't gotten sleep in a couple of days. How can we, what can we help with that leader to say, hey, by the way, maybe a couple things you want to think about right now. We got technical stuff, or here's some stuff to be thinking about. But you as a leader, here we need. What do you need to be? So the being part, I think, is where we all can make the biggest impact. You know.
Yeah, because I've been to picnics and to
Yeah.
events where you could just tell one of the two are just checked out. They're
Yeah.
thinking about other things. They're not there. And but natural peaks are going to happen, Eric. Right? You have a newborn. All of a
Yep.
sudden, that's going to take up a lot of your time.
Yep.
Right, because the big change in your life,
Right.
but how do you just strike the balance between those five?
Well,
And
I think
that's
you said, Joe. You said perfect. Right. I don't know. I don't. It's hard, right? Like I've heard the word balance before. I use the word tension.
mm,
So I don't know. It's hard. Like it's kind of like the plates and how they're all spinning, right? Because a lot of plates are spinning, or we have balls that are bouncing and we're trying to catch them all. I always
mm,
see there's a tension that we have, and we can't. It's hard to say you can get complete balance. I don't know if that's possible, but I
right.
think we all have tension on us. Anyone that says they don't, they're probably not really living. But like
Mm,
you have a tension, and tension isn't necessarily a bad thing. But it's like, okay, Joe, like, hey, we're doing this right now, but you probably thinking about stuff for this weekend you're doing with your family, or you're thinking
mm,
about this activity you have going on. You know, I got all these other things that are moving, and it's tensions on me, but I got to be able to have like the emotional intelligence to go, hey, I'm going to control that here inside me, and then I'm going to be able to be present here. And I think it's in all the domains, right? Everyone and has to, and I think it's one of those things where I go back to like the doctor of discipline I'm talking to, right? You got to have the
uh,
discipline, right? You got to have the discipline to go, hey, like, you know what? I got to manage this tension. And if I don't manage the tension, if I don't have discipline to do that, it's going to go in 8 different directions.
hmm.
And then all of a sudden, I'm going to have, like, how do I say, like, something else managing me versus me managing it.
Going back to the golf
Yeah.
analogy, it's golf. There's just so much to it. It's driving, it's long irons, it's mid irons, it's short game, it's
Mhm.
putting, it's bunker play. We're seeing the British Open right now, or it's
Yeah.
called the Open, and we see just a different kind of golf over there. But how similarly, when the
Yeah.
life plan is done, I mean, I did my life plan a couple years ago. I,
Yeah.
I I need to get it updated. But when you're working with somebody with that, there's just so many different aspects to their
Yeah.
life that has to be accounted for.
Yeah. Well, and I think Joe, to put that golf thing, right? I could probably ask you right now, what is the best? Do you remember? Have you ever made a hole in one?
Yes.
You remember that day?
No. Well, I remember when it happened. I don't remember what day of the week it
Yeah,
was,
no
but
problem. You remember when it happened. So you remember when it
yeah,
happened, and do you
yeah.
remember what course it was at?
Of course, yeah.
Do you
And
remember
hole.
the feeling of when you looked down the hole and saw the ball in there?
Yeah, because I didn't know. I didn't see it go in. But yeah, so yeah, yeah.
Right. So I think it's those contexts that we have around certain things and that like I always believe like we all we all have great talents and skills, right?
Mm,
Do we access it? That's a whole other conversation, right? But I think
mm,
like to your point of we have so many things that we look at in life. I always say like I'm not looking for highlights and lowlights. We're gonna have those. I heard a really smart person who told me that when you're when you're always the tops, you'll see the valleys. When you're in the valleys, you don't see the tops, right?
mm,
So when you're climbing, and this guy climbed a couple big mountains he was telling about, and he's like, you're when you're climbing, you don't ever see the top. That's why it's so hard to get there.
hmm,
But when you're in the top, it's easy to look down and see what's ahead of you.
mm.
And so it's like really good climbers, right? We're always trying to go up, like climbing up, and we know it's hard. That's just how it is. And I tell you, like that's the part where in this climbing analogy, he gave us thing about a rope team, right, Joe? And he said on his rope team, people are on that rope, and you all are together. And he talked about how because I would ask him like because he was showing his pictures and like it was on ice, right? You could fall a long ways, and I'm
Ugh,
like, so what
ugh.
happens if you fall? And he's like, well, that's why you have an ice axe. And I'm like, what's that mean? He's like, well, you if you basically you hold a certain way and then you put it into the ice and you start falling, it slows you down. But on a rope team, if one person falls, everyone falls.
Yeah.
But we all know we're working together to get to that kind of end goal. So I think it's one of those things where when people are looking at their life, they have to be kind of, some people they do it alone a lot, which is cool. That happens in life. We have to go alone. But I think there's people that wrap around us and go like, hey, we're on this journey together. Whether it's in your community group, whether it's your family people, whether it's even at work. We got work people that are like, hey, how are we going to lean in together and get this done? So
How do you keep yourself sharp? How do you keep yourself from jumping the curve, Eric?
well, I'm actually I'm proactively trying to do that. I'm trying to go to that next curve,
Yeah.
right? Because if I'm going along that curve and I just sit myself, then I'm going to kind of come down this part. So what I try and do honestly is I work and engage with a lot of people. I serve with a lot of people, right? In various worlds that like I said, across those 5 domains that are just different people, right?
Mm.
And you can learn so much. Every person, Joe, we can learn from. There's not one person. Like so, in those different domains, I get outside my bubble and I start seeing. It's kind of like when you golf, right? When you're at your home club, you're maybe one of the best players there. But all of a sudden, you jump over to somewhere else and you're like, wow, like that's okay. That's a different way to look at it. And I think everyone, the more you make yourself open to be able to see what else is out there, then you're like, oh my gosh, like there's actually the curve I'm on. It's one curve, but oh, there's another one sitting right there. And like I said, a lot of businesses and people they don't know. They think this is the only curve they should be on. And I think
Hmm.
there's actually more that you can be on.
You know, I'll continue with the golf analogy. I mean,
Yeah.
Tiger Woods has a coach.
Yep.
I think often people are kind of withdrawn and don't want to kind of ask for help and ask for coaching, but it's important to have somebody on the outside kind of guide you along or at least give you some direction.
Oh, yeah. So I'm and Joe, I think that's the number one thing I see from executives I work with and talk with
Mm.
all every day is that um, there's a personal side of it, but on the professional side, I use the term at Gallup. We have a tool called the Board of Directors tool, and we really ask the question of uh, where, as a leader, who's on your board, and I'm not talking your company board, as your personal board.
Huh.
Give me 2 people, and Joe, more than 90% can't give me one. They're like,
Right.
it's lonely being a leader, and I'm like, I get you, I totally get you. The higher you go up, the lonelier it gets, right?
Mm, mm,
That's how it works, right?
mm.
And they said, so what is a board director? And I said, well, everyone's got to have a coach, right? Someone that encourages you, motivates you. So who is that? And they go, well, you know what? I do have. They pay for me. I got some person. Yeah, they pay. Okay. And then I say, well, how about a mentor? And a mentor, be clear, that's someone that has experience or expertise in the area of your interest, right? And so it may not be your role, but it may be someone that has. And then they go, well, that's a harder one. And I said, well, let me ask you, well, how about a role model? How about someone that you look up to and admire for what he or she has achieved? Maybe they're a peer of yours. Maybe you've seen them at a you haven't seen them before, but you're like, there's someone I kind of want to be like. And once again, Joe, right? This is where we have a conversation. If it's not just the one, there's multiple curves it could be looking at. Like, is there someone that's like a really cool dad? You're like, gosh, I want to be like that dad. That dad is so cool. Or hey,
Mm.
I want to be like that person that's in the community helping my neighborhood. It's just everyone, right? But so, and then I say, well, then, so you got those, but then you also have to think about like, as a person, me individually, right? We're all different, Joe, right? But like, how am I skilling myself up, right? Like, I read a lot. It's kind of a thing I kind
Yeah,
of
you
like
do.
doing. I'm not the best reader, but I try and take as much in because there's so much knowledge. But it's like, who's someone out there that's an expert, um, that maybe has knowledge of something I don't have. So like, gosh, I've got so many great folks, but I've got on my board. There's a guy of mine. I call him. He's my chief operating officer. His name's Joe, and Joe is phenomenal. The guy runs a commercial real estate company. He knows real estate really well. But he's operationally minded. And I'm like, how do you learn certain things?
Hmm.
And he's my expert, right? But there's also people that you have that are just more of like accountability people. Like I have people
Mm.
that are managers of mine that I meet, and I know it's not going to be a fun conversation because they're always going to ask me, "Hey, you got one goal you're working on? How's it going?" And I'm like, "Let me tell you about another cool thing happening." And they're like, "I'm sorry,
Mm.
great. Tell me about this one right here." And I'm like, right? And we've had, I mean, Joe, you've been in this company, like, I remember back in the day of my first peer group meeting where there was a guy giving his QBR, right? And everyone jumped on him because he took a goal of losing 10 pounds and he said, I can't do it. And they sat for 10 minutes around the table. And each person went through an app, an eating plan, a group. And by the end, I'm sitting there going, I didn't know there was that curve. I didn't know. I only thought the curve for these people was vocation about the EBITDA. I didn't know it was this curve about life. I
Yeah,
was like,
yeah, sure.
right. And so I think that you get that. And then you start saying, okay, like, and people I think have this. I've got the stuff behind me, but think of like I don't want to start pulling books, but rocket fuel, right? And it was on traction. You know this. This is like the secondary version
Right.
right. But it's like you got to have a complementary people of you, someone that maybe on your board that maybe isn't exactly like you, which is awesome. I think that's some of the best things to have, where someone opens you up and says, "Hey, like, have you thought of it this way?" I've got a friend of mine. Her name's Lynn. She's the most amazing thinker on planet Earth, and she says things, and I'm like, "Wow, Lynn, you need to be like, you're awesome." And she's like, "No, it's just a different way to think about it."
Mm.
And then I think also you got someone that's like I don't call him. It's not a friend, but it's someone that basically is like your. It's someone has a shared interest, and with all that too, Joe. I'm giving you the personal side of it. Like here's Eric's board of directors, but I also should be thinking about kind of like whose board am I on? Like who's my proteges? Like I think I have a great friend. His name's Rex. It's this phenomenal thing about hands up, hands down. So you got to make sure that you're going through and looking for people's feedback, but you also have to make sure you're putting your hands down to help other people. And I
Mm.
think we all like have phenomenal like Joe, your story, man, how many people does that motivate when they hear about you and what you did that struggle with certain things in life, and they're like, I could never. It's gonna be so hard for me, and it's like to have someone come alongside and go, no, you totally can.
Mm.
Yeah, and I mean, Joe, I'm fortunate, right? Like that I get to walk in circles with, in my community domain, and I wear a hat. I look totally different, but like people that have been in pretty rough situations, like running yards and jails, right? And I come right next to him and I'm like, I want to learn, how did you do that? Because it's kind of like a board meeting. How did you keep all these people straight? He's like, well, you just have rules. And I'm like, cool. How do you like, but you know what I mean? But it's that part of, and I'll tell you, it's the hardest thing, Joe. And when I talk about board of director stuff, every time I walk through leader, they're like, okay, this is hard. It's going to take a while. I'm like, yeah, I told us, right? I mean, Gallups got like a kind of a tool we have. And for those 6 to 7 roles, if you can get that filled out in about 6 months or a year and keep it rolling, you're great. And they're like,
Wow.
it's gonna be hard. And I'm like, yeah, if you want to grow, if you want to come up the curve and you want to jump that next one, that's what it's gonna be about.
Yeah, that concept of board of directors is
Mm,
really, really interesting, and also the just general curiosity and just growing. I mean, that's the mission of this podcast, Eric. I
yeah,
mean, I get to talk to really
mm,
smart and such different perspectives that
yeah,
I just enjoy it. I may or may not agree, but that doesn't really matter. It's
right,
just I enjoy the perspective,
right.
So I was just talking to somebody in the music industry who's a musician, and we
Mm,
were just talking about how to get new music into your life. It's when we
oh,
were younger, Eric, we would listen to the radio. We'd get new
yeah,
music, and
yeah,
MTV would force
yeah,
okay. But now I've got to see it on Saturday Night Live, or I've got to
yeah,
have some friend recommend it, or
yeah,
because it really doesn't get it's so different now. So it's the
yeah,
same thing with knowledge, I think, right? You want to be around those who have certain levels of knowledge and experience that perhaps you could share off of and
yeah,
learn from.
yeah. And I think, Joe, it's that part of having the willingness and openness to know that people have that. You know what I mean?
Mm,
Like I literally, I'll ask. I mean, tomorrow I'll ask a homeless guy, "Hey, tell me what's going on right now." And I'll tell you, some of the most resourceful people I've ever met.
yeah.
Everyone's got their own view on people with there, but they know certain things. Oh yeah, this happened here, this happened here, and it just. But I think it's that perspective, and there's times in life, Joe, that I haven't been that way. That I'm like,
Mm,
hey, I'm a young punk. I know, right? But you got to. I think you that it gets beyond that on that personal curve, right? I can keep being me, and then, but if once you jump and you go, no, it's we.
hmm.
The we curve is much. Then all of a sudden you start learning, like, oh my gosh, we can sit and talk about something, and you get a different perspective. Like I was, I believe every person on planet Earth has got some piece of nugget of knowledge that I'm trying to grab
Yeah. Yeah.
because they're
Ab
just, you know what I mean?
Yeah, to think you can't learn something from someone is just arrogance,
Yeah, it's
right?
just it's people get pride, right? They get
Yeah.
pride. They think like, hey, cool, like I know, but it's like, no way. There's only one person who knows everything, but and everyone else, we're trying to do what we can do, and that's that part around. I think we have so much energy and emotion, but we don't ever establish even on our first curve. Like, okay, like what does good look like? I mean, my wife and I have this thing called a vision retreat every 6 months. We go off and we talk about life, what's going on, but we're always saying, hey, are we at where we need to be? Like, are we fulfilling our, like, what we say we want out of a relationship? Are we bringing that for both of us? Because I think a lot of
Mm,
times, Joe, you know, any of the curves, I think even in business, we're really good at giving people leftovers.
hmm,
And I
hmm.
that happens, right? I give people leftovers, and I'm not proud of that, but I'm at least aware of it, and then I can
Mm.
improve upon it. But life gets so busy, and stuff happens, and it's like we come back to the table of the curve of family with like leftovers. Like, okay, hey, I was spent at work, I got 10% left over. What can I what can I give to everyone here, right? And it's like they're like, no, we want the 90. And it's like Saturday and Sunday, we'll give you that. Well, I
Mm.
got stuff, But I think it's that part of knowing, hey, there's parts where we can be disciplined. Joe, we can be disciplined and say, look, no, 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 we're not going to. We're not going to give leftovers. We're going to make sure we look at life and say, hey, in these different areas of life, I mean, we're not going to be sitting back going, man, I shoulda, coulda, woulda. No, no, we all have that opportunity. Is it going to be hard? Totally. Are we going to always get what we want? No, but I think like I always say, Joe, like there's always a I was sitting with one of my mentors, and they're such smart people, and the guy's like, Eric, he's like, you have to understand, like in life, we talk about success and significance,
Hmm.
right? Those two big words, right? We always talk about, Joe, right? There's the book of Halftime that's out there. I'm reading a good one right now called Falling Upwards, which I think it's another interesting one, right? But this, when you get these wise people in your life and they say things, and he said this quote that just like I'm still rocked by it right now. I don't know how to. He said it, and
Hmm.
it took me like about 60 seconds to take it in. I said, repeat. He said, Eric, he said, significance is in the being. It's
Hmm.
expressed when you do. And I
Hmm.
was like, what? Like, he's like, no, you have to be with people, be in the line. It's like this. Joe, you'll see, like when someone plays golf, right? If they're not in that moment of that golf shot, understanding how the ball's lying, what the wind's like, what they're shooting to, where is it at? There's so many different pieces. When a really good golfer, like I could probably ask you what's involved with the golf shot, and you would go, oh my gosh, let me tell you. You could tell me probably for 10, 15 minutes all the
Yeah.
pieces. But you've been in that. You are you get in that mindset and you're there. You have an opportunity, and you're a great golfer. You have a great chance of getting greens in regulation, getting on the green, probably getting close to. But a lot of times is that as people, even on our teams, right, as a leader, they're not being, they're doing. So when
Hmm.
they go out and have that tough conversation with someone, they're just doing, getting it done. Hey, let's get this done. Here's what I got to tell you about. But they're not being and say, hey, before we start, how's life? What's going on? How you doing? Right? And because that gives a good frame of reference so that they can be in the moment with that person. That's where their significance is going to be. At the end of the day, it's like we're all working hard, we're all doing great things, but they always say, I forgot, I'm going to butcher this one, but they say it never matters, like, or I shouldn't say never, but it doesn't matter how you are in the room. It's when you leave the room that matters,
All right.
right? So it just,
People
but it's
people don't remember what they say, they remember how you make them feel. Yeah.
exact same thing. I'm saying,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like, and then
Yeah.
I mean, I bet, Joe, you could probably tell me. There's a couple of people I love going and play golf with. I just love it. It's just a great time. We go
Yeah.
play, and it's just like, and ironically, if you probably look at your rounds, you probably have pretty good rounds with them.
Right.
And so
You
there's other people you won't. Yeah.
you could tell a lot from a person after playing golf with them, by the way. Their character comes out. I mean, are they
Tell
a
me more.
club
Tell me more.
thrower? Are they a club thrower? Are they, right? Are they impatient? Are they, that was a par, right? No, no, it was birdie, or do they right, that kind of thing, right? Or hey, you may be playing against them, playing a little friendly match, and they
Yeah, yeah,
still say, "Hey, get that birdie in, knock that in." Do they still cheer you on, even though you're in? You could tell a lot from a person in 4 hours. You could really tell their character.
yeah,
Golf makes people very honest. But
yeah,
when you were talking a moment before, you were talking about being and doing. It
yeah.
almost, Eric, sounds like the difference between a leader and a manager.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, yeah. Well, we have. Oh yeah, that's a whole. I think, um, it's funny. So I throw my Gallup cat on for a second, right? There's a huge movement right now because of, think of like all of our generations, right? So there's the Gen Xers, the Gen Zs, that there's the millennials and the millennials. There's two different types.
Huh.
Then there's the millennials are about me. But there
Huh.
are some millennials that are actually very good. They are work hard. They're on it, right? And then we have our new alphas coming, and the alphas, these kids, like they are all in. They move on it. They build businesses. They're just strong. But I think, when we're looking at, all the people we're dealing with, there's a revolution happening in businesses that the ones that get it get, the ones that don't, they're still confused. And it's this revolution moving from boss to coach.
Hmm.
Anyone that thinks they're, a boss, I'm a dictator. Here's what my way or highway. Here's what it is, right? Where you're moving as a coach, you have to understand the Z's and alpha, they look world totally different, right?
Hmm.
Before we would be like, hey, it's about our paycheck. These people over here, like, no, it's about my purpose. They don't. In the past, you would think about, okay, look, I'm doing, I'm an 8 to 5 or 9 to 5, or I got my Monday to Friday. That's the cycle. Theirs is 24/7,
Wow.
right? Because they don't know it. Like, I mean, think about technology, right? They don't technology. Technology doesn't. People, why they had that 8 to 5 is because that's when they would turn their computer on and off, or they would
Hmm.
do work. And then nowadays, people are influencers. Do they work 8 to 5? Do they work money? I mean, that's everyone wants to be an influencer, right? The concept of working like days, and even where we work, that concept's gone. Like,
Yeah.
that's so 2019ish. Like, like 20, like, you work where? Like, that sounds weird. Like, but so that's, I'm saying, every a lot of young folks I know, they want to be influencers. Influencers work everywhere, anywhere, with
Hmm.
anyone.
Hmm.
And as leaders, if we don't understand that that's how people look at things, we're not gonna be that coach that we can be. And when you're a coach, then let me tell you, Joe, it's like, uh, how I explain to leaders, they're more worried about their social cred than what's on their paycheck. So sorry,
Interesting.
their social credibility. So when they're out with their crew or with their friends, right? They're like, yeah, hey, I work at the Dash, Forza Dash. And they're like, what's that? Oh, I can't. It's pretty cool. I can't. There's some cool stuff happening, but it's cool. I work there. And they're like, what's the Dash? And, oh yeah, no, and they literally will build up the whole thing about this environment and the crew that are
Interesting.
there. They're not talking about the product. They're not talking about, but they're about the crew. Hey, yeah, and
Huh.
there's our leader Joey. Dude, the dude got this really cool vibe online, and they got their own lingo, right? And it slaps. I mean,
Nice.
so that's where I think, we all. That's why I said we can learn from them. Like, I'd sit back and I'm like,
Absolutely.
I'm like, hey, tell me what's this whole slaps things mean? What's that mean? And they're like, yeah, slaps. And I'm like, I have no clue. I'm an old guy. And they're like, oh yeah, no, it means it's good. It hits. And I'm like,
Sure.
okay. So, but I think that's that part, Joe. That's like, any leader today doesn't understand they need to be a coach over a boss, and that means any. I mean, like, I do table group stuff, right? For, Working Genius, and if Pat was sitting right here, Lindsay, he'd be like, Eric, think of like that ideal team player. You haven't read that one, or The Motive. Take those two books; those are great ones for right now. And it's like, people that don't want to run meetings,
Hmm.
you're not. You got to run good meetings. You got to get people together, and it's not about the doing; it's about the being in there. Be with them, right? Like, you don't have to like have us. You want to have some structure, but it's not like you have to run an L10 meeting every time. Like, right? We're people. Talk to my people stuff. But
Going
yeah.
back to your board of directors, Eric, how does one find a mentor?
So you know what's funny? This is like had this conversation 2 days ago. So here's we're surprised. A lot of mentors out there want to be mentors, but no one asks them.
Hmm.
It happened. So I always sit down with someone else. Okay, cool. What I want to do is I want you to just draw. I want you to write down um, what is like either skills or experience you want to have. Just write that down. Give me 10 things on their experience or skills that you want to have. Then I want you to do is I want you to think of someone that you've either seen, and it's got to be somewhere like not all virtual, but you've seen or that you know of them. They're in your friend circle or in your circles, even on LinkedIn, and put a name next to that.
Hmm.
And it usually takes about 20, 30 minutes to do this. Once they do it, great. I'm like, cool. Then what I'm going to have you do is I'm going to basically have you go and you can do whatever you want. You want to chat GDP, you want to write yourself, but I want you to reach out to that person and you want to communicate to them that you value this, whatever experience and knowledge that you've identified. You want to be clear of, hey, by the way, can I get just about 15 minutes of your time just to ask you a question about that? And then what can you give them? I always say you came with someone giving them something. Those three things.
Hmm.
And that model, it's Joe, it's 90+% people come back. Because what ends up happening is people want a mentor. I mean, if Joe, someone came to you and said, hey, can you teach me how to putt? Could you give
Hmm.
me like, could you spend, just an hour with me just to explain how to putt? Like, because I don't know. There's something called a break, or
Oh,
there's
jeez.
something called, like someone like I'm putting, and sometimes the ball will like it'll turn, and I don't even know how it turns. Right, but someone's got the experience. They're like, oh my god, and I put about 60 putts around, and so I'm hoping to get better.
Whoa.
Yes, right. But see but someone that has it, they're just chomping. They're just like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, like it's one of those things where you can see it. But the other person, like I remember the curve I was on, so they think the curve is six. If I get to 55, oh my gosh! And you're like, no, 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 no. There's a curve over here. You want to be like 20s, 30s.
Yes.
But that's so I would say that part that is the board of directors thing is such a key thing at any level, right? And I'd say even like if a CEO since right now, it's like as a CEO, I know the top up here is very lonely. There's no one else there.
Mm,
But
mm,
anyone that's ever climbed a mountain, anyone, even Everest, right? Every person who's climbed Everest, they always have a Sherpa with them. Always,
right.
always. I'm not saying that you know that person may be more intelligent than you. They may not have more resources than you, but they have knowledge for you, right? And I had a very smart woman at Gallup. We call her the Velvet Hammer, and she does a lot of executive coaching. And she goes, you know what? I don't have to understand heart surgery. I don't have to be like a surgeon to understand heart surgery. As a CEO, you may be looking for other CEOs and they're all busy, but maybe other people in your patch, right? Maybe in those other domains. Maybe it's another leader that's a community leader in your area,
Hmm.
right? It doesn't have to be the same. Like I think a lot of times people are trying to find the same exact person, and I'm like, exact's not always the best. Like exact sometimes can be. It's like groupthink. We think the same thing, right? But if I go and I'm asking someone, hey, you know what? Your experience you've had, like I want to draw from that. And yeah, I know you live in Nairobi and I live in the US, but like you've probably been through a bit more heartache than I'd love to just get 10 minutes of your time just to learn. And
Mm.
then yeah.
And what are the responsibilities of a mentor?
So it yeah, everyone's got their own take on it. I always say that, as a mentor, you're there to show up and to be.
Mm.
So the person's coming to you, they're the ones that are owning as far as what they want to talk about. But when I'm talking about showing up, is that uh, my mentor that I have, right? It's kind of like, and the word LifeNet. We have a LifeNet of people that are supporting us. LifeNet for me usually goes about 2 years. So I have someone on that LifeNet. They usually will rotate off, and I'll find someone new.
Hmm.
But during that time frame, I kind of make it formal. I'm like, I'll tell my people, hey, by the way, my chief financial officer. I'm like, hey, Sergio, you're a great guy. Just want to make sure you know that when we meet, we have coffee, lunch, whatever. I'm going to have some questions for you, and I just want to make sure I get your feedback, your knowledge on this. So when they have to they're not a wallflower going, yep, yep, they have to be, um, and they're making a commitment of time, So they're going to meet quarterly with the person. I'm going to provide feedback, and part of the things they do too is that they can also bring resources that I may not know about, right? So, like for example, the golf example. So, if you were my person is to be my chief golf officer, right? I
Mm.
want you to be so when I show up, you're going to say, hey, I've been thinking since last time we met, your putter's really old and your grip's off. And you're like, well, my grip, I don't even, does that make a difference? Oh, yeah, it does. Right. So, it's as a mentor too. I always say, like, when you're doing the hands down to mentor someone, be very clear. You're making an impact in someone's uh, life, not just maybe in one domain you're thinking about, but they say one thing, it can go across their family and everything else. And I don't know, I would think that all of us as we mature, we want to be able to have a thing where we can actually look to others, not just for help, but to give help, you know?
Mm. Going to that golf analogy, Eric,
Yeah.
when people I tell people that, golf comes up and they don't play, they always say, I want to get into it. And I always discourage them because um I do it because look, it's time consuming. It's
Yeah.
expensive. It'll keep you up at night. When you miss those couple of birdie putts and you
Yeah.
can't sleep that night, I'm going to feel responsible. But
Yeah.
I also, though, there's a part of me that says, no, don't do it. But you know what? If you really wanted to do it, you would see behind my words that I want you to come in, but I want you to treat it seriously. I
Yeah.
want you to get lessons. I get 8 to 10 lessons every summer. So I've been playing for 20 years, right?
Yeah.
And I'm a single handicap, right? I plenty of room for growth. But I enjoy playing tournaments.
Mhm.
I enjoy the camaraderie. I enjoy pace of play. I enjoy the gentlemanly,
Yeah.
just the natural, you govern your own rules in
Yeah.
golf. You call your own penalties. I
Right.
mean, it's I'm going to say gentleman's sport. I don't know if that's politically correct or not, but you,
Yeah.
you have to, you have to monitor yourself. You never have the same shot twice, Eric, right?
Mhm.
Sure, the
Mhm.
ball may be in the same spot at one point, but it may be different time of day. There's different wind. The pin's in a different location. There's
Yeah.
so many other factors. I just doubled the last hole or I just
Mm.
birdied the last hole. There's so
Mhm.
many factors. You can never
Mm.
have the same shot twice.
Mm.
That's the beauty of it. So
Mm.
I like making that analogy. But
Mm.
going back to the mentor,
Yeah.
maybe as you're talking and describing it, I've done a little over 400 of these, and
Right.
perhaps I've had over 400 mentors and I didn't even realize it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Because the first step, right, Joe, I think, is that because you've had people that said, I'm going to take time to engage with you.
Yeah.
Right. So that's amazing. I mean, that's amazing in itself, right? That shows the character of you because people want to invest in you because you're open that way.
Mm.
Um, and I think too, like, I think we all have amazing stories, Joe, right? It's just, do we have the willingness to tell that story? And what I mean, when we tell a story, are we? We're not afraid someone's going to reject it, right? We're going to tell it, but
Hmm.
then we also have to understand that we have to be willing to open to listen to someone else's story because, like everything you just said about all that golf stuff, man, those could be different chunks for different people in life,
Yeah.
right? Like, hey, by the way, I look at it like when like I had a friend of mine just sold his business, right? And I'm like, imagine like when you just made that birdie, right? And you're like, awesome, and then then you come to hole number 10 and you're like, I'm only halfway through. And I'm like, you're only halfway through. Yeah, there's still nine.
Hmm.
And they're like, well, can't I just stop at the turn? No, no, you can't. You have to keep going. And they're like, well, but I did a birdie. I'm like, no, but that's the front nine, the back nine. And they're like, yeah, but there's a lot of famous golf courses that have really hard holes in the back nine. I'm like, yeah, that's
Yeah.
how yes, the back nine's the hardest. And they're like, why would I want to go ahead? Why would can I go take up like pickleball? And I'm
Ah,
like, not if you like pickleball, it's great. Whatever
that's great.
sport, right? Can I go take up a different sport? And I'm like, no, but like,
Voting.
think about this. You've in that book, that Falling Upward book. It's funny. The guy makes the point that in the first half of our life, we're learning. We basically bring all our skills up to a certain level. The second half is where we apply them. And I was like,
Mm.
so could you? I mean, I've known leaders. Uh, Joe, think about that curve of vocation, and they sold their business, and all of a sudden, like, what am I going to do? I'm like, there's a lot of struggling small businesses out there, small business owners that have no clue on how to build a team or no clue on how to deal with business adversity.
Mm.
Like how, like when you have to make that paycheck, and you're like, okay, what am I picking between the paycheck, or am I picking between buying this? Like I was involved with small business at one time, and we were out of a garage, and we had to buy our first printer. And we're like, man, do we put on the credit card? Do we buy like the laser printer? Do we buy like the inkjet? We're trying to like we're in this mode. And we're like, man. But the funny thing is, there's someone else going through that same thing. And I believe like my faith's important to me, and I say, God brings me through certain things so that I can pass it on to someone else. Because they're gonna be someone
Mm,
else in the same situation, like, man, I just don't know if I can do this. And it's like, you totally can. You have the people that board of directors is actually already around people. They just don't know it.
mm,
I would
mm.
say I'm like, and people that get it in place and start going, they're like, oh my gosh, they've been so helpful. And I'm like, yeah, they're there. We just got to be more intentional and more disciplined on actually asking the question, right, Joe? Like, if we're disciplined, going to someone and said, hey, I think you're a great person. I love how we have our conversations. They're somewhat superficial sometimes, but I want to really ask you for help in this area here because you're really good at it. And they're like,
Yeah.
sure, yeah. What do you need? Then all of a sudden we just added maybe a role model on something, or hey, maybe we
Right.
just added an expert on our board.
Hmm. How important is your spirituality, Eric, in your life?
Oh, dude, number one. Yeah,
Is it number one? Really?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, anyone knows me. Yeah, it's like, but been given a lot. Joe, you have to understand
Yeah.
when you lean in, you get a lot, man. It's like, but you have a lot you got to care for too.
Right.
So
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. And are you religious or are you spiritual?
I have
Or
a
are they the same?
relationship. So I
Ah,
kind of I have this. So I have it's funny. I have people get things different. I'm a Christian, right? But it's funny because all Christians are broken. Anyone doesn't tell you that, they're not Christian, right? So we all got issues, lots of issues. But it's interesting because like uh, it's a relationship. Anyone that thinks we can always say there's people that have whatever religion, they do it by a law. It says this, I got to do this. It says this, and it's like, well, technically, any I'd say all the different religions out there too. I mean, any religion, they have a book that they have, and some people follow that book by the number, right? But if you really look at the people that they're following, they never were necessarily always by that book. They
mm,
obviously were the main thing leaning in. So my relationship, so I had a guy named Jesus. He's awesome. Um, that kind of helps guide me in all areas. And I always say I have got a thing called the X Factor that I have a long story on. So if anyone wants to come reach out to me, let me know. But what I had when I was doing it my way, and then what I have now,
hmm.
it's not even in comparison. It's like it's so, and once you understand that, you're like, oh my gosh, like, and then it's like when you have a board of directors, that's one thing, but then it's weird for me, but like when you have someone that's the creator walking with you, you have a much different perspective. Now it's not always
Mm.
easy, Joe. Right? There's times where all of a sudden, like when we do life planning, right? When we get our purpose in life, and it's with us everywhere we go. So if all of a sudden we're running a business partner, and it's not, oh gosh, I have to do that for that person. Now, my belief, my faith, God goes, yeah, for every person. They're an image bearer of me. If you don't like them, you don't like me. And I'm like, okay, I love them. I don't always agree with them, but that's not me. And I don't like. I would say like if you look at my wrists, I don't have any holes here, so I didn't hang on a cross.
Ah,
I can't judge people. I cannot. But the interesting about it is that part of that's a really cool thing that people when you jump a curve, especially in the spiritual, when you jump that curve, you kind of think it's about you and about okay how I'm growing, what's my religious guide, what's Jesus doing for me in that. But when you jump the curve, all of a sudden you start seeing what he's doing for others, and you're like,
mm.
hold up, how did you do that? And then all of a sudden you're like, he's like, oh, I'm doing it all the time, and you're too busy being not or busy doing instead of being right. And I mean, Joe, amazing
Oh,
stuff. That really I think makes it so that when people sit back and they're like, man, I just that cancer diagnosis or gosh, that part where I had this relationship just issue and they feel like they're by themselves and it's like, no, 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 you're missing it. You've got a tribe people around you here, but you've got like the biggest force on planet universe with you. And it's once you see that, you're like, okay, cool. Like my open right, my father in law is probably gonna pass in like 2 or 3 weeks. Kind of a bummer thing. It's not super happy right now, but so calm and so peaceful. He's like, yeah, I've had a good run. I'll see you in a couple. Well, not hopefully a couple of years away from now, but yeah, I'll
right.
see you there. And it's like, but that also, dude, old farmer, love learning from people, right? Super smart guy, cattle rancher too, and but that's where like when we're here and we're doing our daily, right? We got to make sure it's not just the one curve we're on. There's multiple that we're looking at, and we have attention knowing that there's multiple. I would say once we do a life plan, Joe, you probably felt this. Once you have it, all of a sudden you start going like, oh my gosh, there are other areas I should be kind of playing in,
Mm.
right? Like, gosh, I feel like I do want to lean more into community stuff, or I do want to do more with family, or do, and it's like but it's attention we have, and we just have to kind of sit back and, I pray. So I just ask God because I'm broken. I don't know how to do it. And so I pray. I'm like, hey, just give me perspective. And he brings people in. That's really, he brings people in. And I'm like, how did you do that? And he's like, what do you? And
Hmm.
there's lots. I always say we all have one of my really, really good buddies. His name's Fred. He is always talking about we are an abundant life, bud. We get so much. We are like, and we
Mm.
live, Joe, in the country where we're the 1%ers, right? We have the
Yes.
1% of everything. So we're, most of the world that's not like us. I
Very
do a
fortunate.
lot for Habitat for Humanity, and we build in other parts of the world. And I
Mm.
can tell you, man, like beans, you know, beans and water or rice and water, that's the daily. So when we walk
Mm.
in and we're strutting like anything else, it's weird. They're like, what is that? What is that? And they get enamored with like candy. They're like, I've never seen that before,
Wow.
right? So once we understand that, then we understand that when there's tension there too, right? But then we start to understand, like, gosh, okay, what's that purpose that I'm here for? And what am I really trying to help lean in on? And it can be in any of those areas, any of those curves. Like, but when we do it, Joe, it's so cool because like people come up and they're like, wow, that's so great that happened. And I'm like, yeah, well, you did it. You did it. And they're
Mm.
like, yeah, I just didn't know I could. I didn't know I was supposed to. And it's like, well, now you're more disciplined,
Mm. Mm.
And they say, okay, I'm going to do that more often. I'm like, yes, because there's probably one person needs your help right now, but you're not letting them know that. And they're like, but I would do it if they asked me. So that comes back to that mentor thing of like, there's so many people that literally, once they get to that mountaintop area, they're like, cool. So I have no problem put my hand down and help anyone. Tell me who I can help. And I'm like, they're around you. Well, they don't ask me. Sometimes you need to ask someone. Hey,
Mm.
by the way, I heard you asking about this. I can provide some feedback on if you want. So, but yeah,
It's interesting about just generally giving advice. When I was in HTG, the peer
yeah,
group, of course, which is now Evolve, I was facilitator for a while, and we were
yeah,
just kind of trained. You don't really say tell if somebody presents a problem and asks me for my advice, I would say, "Well, here's something that's happened to me that's similar, and
yeah.
this is what I did, and this is the lessons I learned from it." You
Hmm.
know, sometimes giving advice just seems a little awkward. In your life
Yeah,
generally,
yeah,
Eric, are you just the way you approach things, you're an
yeah.
avid reader, you just your general approach to life, is it more science or art?
Gosh, it's uh, I would say faith, but I mean,
So is faith science or art? That's very interesting.
you
Is
know
it
what? It's once again, it's kind of some people say there's a certain way to do it, and there's a certain
right?
people that say not. So I mean, I look at it as that like when you're going through life, right? There's the art part of it that's more that it progresses as you go on. You see more of it. I think there's sometimes a science or structure part that we just live in on the daily. Everyone's different too. Like in Strength Finder Land at Gallup, right? We always talk about everyone's got their top 10 talents and top 10 strengths. And this morning I was on a mastermind meeting. We were talking about how like everyone is different and we can't project on people what we see.
Right.
They because that's not them. They need to develop into it. But I think that part of like I don't know. It's interesting, Joe, because kind of what you're saying before about advice and things like that. I always say that everyone comes things differently. They have different lenses.
Mm.
And so I always say, like, if someone wants me, I use the word consult. So if someone says, hey, I want how did you do that? I'm like, okay, I'm going to put my consultant hat on and tell you how I did it.
Mm.
But if you want me to coach, I'm going to ask you a question of what you
Right.
want to do.
Right. Goals.
So because I don't know what
Mm.
they, like I could tell them something, but that's my frame, that's my lens.
Mhm.
Right. And it's like, I'm a weird dude. I'm got a lot of energy. I got a lot of stuff going on. Like, so like, I'm blessed. I have an amazing wife. And so she puts up with me a lot. And how I think I should provide feedback on something, she's like, I wasn't looking for that. And I'm like, okay,
Mm.
she's so, but I think we can all like as leaders or coaches, the more questions we ask and the more listening we do, the more value we provide.
Mm. So it's just this morning, so one of my hobbies, Eric, is I like to cook, right? I have Italian heritage, so I just like to experiment. And uh, what I've learned recently
Yep.
is that what I like most about it is I walk into the kitchen and I
Yeah,
like to unclutter. I like
yeah,
minimalism. I don't like any clutter.
yeah.
I go into the kitchen, it's nice and clean, it's uncluttered. I start pulling ingredients out and
Mm,
I start cooking and I start experimenting. And then
mm,
people come and I'm feeding them, I'm feeding
mm.
myself, and I clean as I go. I was a cook during college at a
Cool.
hospital. So I clean as you go. So once everything's done, I finish cleaning and I put away, and now I walk away from that kitchen the way it was there. In my life, whenever I'm working on any projects in
Yeah.
business, I never get to see it from beginning to end. I'm
Mm,
delegating
mm,
and I'm doing
mm,
things
mm,
like that.
mm,
So just the sense of completion is
mm,
wonderful. But
mm,
when cooking, there's a certain sense of improvisation. I think
mm,
I'm going to
mm, mm.
try this.
Yeah.
We got this in the refrigerator. What can I do
Nice.
with this?
Yeah.
Just this morning, yesterday, we
Yeah.
had 5 or 6 bananas that nobody ate. So I
Okay.
said, I'm going to make banana bread. Never made it in
Oh,
my life.
nice.
Never
Yeah.
made it in my life. Now, the problem with baking to me is that it's too scientific. It's
Yeah, yeah.
these ingredients, this temperature, this length.
Yeah.
It's very, whereas cooking, I can, well, when it kind of like this, when it gets that way, you can make changes, but it's too rigid to me. And
Yeah.
it came out fine. Everybody liked it, but it just seems kind of, but next time I make it, I'm not going to follow those ingredients. I think I could add a little less brown
Yeah.
sugar. I think I could add a little more. I'm going to try
Yeah.
molasses.
Yeah.
I'm gonna add my own. So I think in life we have to have a certain amount of science. We have to read. We have to have some structure. But
Yeah.
then there's certain things where we need flexibility where we can make
Amen.
it our own.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree with you. Yeah. You just, and I
Don't really
think you
have a
have to be
question there.
like, Joe B, like I said, you have to be open to that, right? Like, I think if you
Yeah.
live on one side too much, sometimes you may miss, or I think like, and I've done this in the past where I'll value one versus the other too much.
Mm.
And then I don't validate the other side. So I miss it that someone may be so artful, and that that it was funny. The one I could give you a faith example. It was a guy that taught me actually how to do life plans. One of the smartest guys I've ever met, from just knowing the stuff we're talking about. And we met in Colorado, and we were having a day long, just one on one conversation. And we meet at a diner, and we're sitting there, and he's like, "Okay, I'm going to pray." And so he starts praying, and so I put my head down and praying, right. And I look up, and he's like, "So why'd you put your head down?" And I'm like, "Well, just how I pray. Like, everyone puts their head down." He's like, "Well, he's here. We're just talking to him. You don't have to like." I'm like, "Oh," I'm like, "I didn't know." Like, you always like. He's
It's
like,
interesting.
"Yeah." He's like, "I'm having a conversation with him, right?" Like, if you were in a conversation going, "Joe, how are you doing, man?" "I'm Joe. I'm
Yeah.
so grateful that we're together." He's like, "Just something to think about." And I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, totally." I didn't, but you know what I mean. But it's one of those things where you just meet. It's. I mean, we could apply a lot of places where someone that's in a peer group, they hear something from someone, and they're like, "Can you do that?
Mm.
Are we allowed to do that?" And it's like, "Well, why are you not?"
Hmm.
Right? And there's times where, I mean, I think about the pandemic, and when we had our homeless ministry, we used to have people come to our church with hundreds. Like, Joe, before the pandemic, the weekend before, I think we had like 360 plus people come. The pandemic, the next, we were first and third Saturdays when we do our deal. So the first Saturday in March 2020, we had 8 people show up.
Wow.
And literally, like, I was sitting there and I'm like, okay, about a half an hour in, right? Because we served everyone, right? We had 14 volunteers. The week before, 2 weeks before, we had 176 volunteers. So people had their gloves on, they're all right. And I said, hey, let's go grab a van 11, and we're going to grab the little warmer for burritos, and we're going to go take it out. And someone's like, we can't do that. No, we have to be at the building. We can't go. And I'm like, someone go grab 11. So the van pulls up. I'm like, I'm going to grab the red warmer. Who's coming with me? And there, I got a lot of like, and I'm like,
Hmm.
this one girl, Terry, raised her hand, and she's like, I'll go. And so I'm like, cool. And we start loading up the burritos, and I'm like, we'll be back. So I jump in the van. We start driving I'm in Arizona. We go to parks, and all the homeless people, they had the same thing as us, right? They're lockdowns. So we're
Hmm.
handing out burritos and water, and I come back 2 minutes later. I'm like, I need more burritos. They're like, well, what are you doing? I'm like, I just gave out 30 burritos at Pioneer Park. We need more. And they're like, there's people out there. I'm like, yeah, we can go to them. We're going to take it to them. We've done this for 25, 30 years in a building. We're now going to go to them. And someone's like, I'll go, I'll go, I'll go. And so we've got 3. And so now we actually have solar thing we do on campus, but now we have a
Wow.
mobile act, so we take people out. But it's that part of like, if we would have missed of just doing the same, doing,
Hmm.
and not being in the moment going, hey, we can go out. We can go. And that's what I'm telling leaders here. It's like, don't don't like be doing what you're doing every day and miss out on the being out with your teams or your family or people in your community or even you as personal, right? Like there's like moments people have where they like they're in their own introspection. They learn something about themselves through someone else, and it's like, oh, I would have never thought about that. Thankfully, I'm that encourager that should be encouraging people. I've got this great gift, and yeah, go and encourage everyone. Go do that.
Yeah, that's a wonderful perspective, Eric. So I started my business in the 90s, you know this, and I was
Yeah,
working way too hard.
yeah,
I was working 14, 16 hours days and not paying attention to my health at all. I was eating poorly, drinking a lot of sugar, and
yeah.
I got myself up to 340 pounds. I was a 46-inch waist. I'm
Wow.
32 now.
Yeah.
And doctor said to me, if I don't lose the weight, you're not going to see your daughter graduate. So she was just
Mm,
born. My oldest was
mm,
just born.
mm.
So I'm driving home, punching the steering wheel, right? Saying,
Yeah,
what have I done?
yeah,
This is me now,
mm,
and I can treat myself poorly, but now I've got this family, and I
yeah,
want to be around for her. So I took the next 6, 7 months, changed
yeah,
all my habits, and I lost about 130 pounds. I kept it off, and because you can't look at losing weight as a finishing line. Too many
right.
people do that because they just go
Amen.
back to it. You've got to make the changes. The temporary diets are not good for you.
Yeah,
um the yo-yo dieting, I think they
yeah,
call it.
yeah.
So people ask me how, right? They want a quick answer. My one word answer is always discipline, right? We
Mm,
mentioned it before. I developed a routine. I developed, direction, willpower, order, strictness, focus.
mm,
And that's how I lost the weight.
mm.
I wonder how discipline plays a role in your life, Eric Townsend.
Oh man, well, I mean, so everyone uses the D word differently, right? Some people
D
get
word.
afraid of it. Some people they love and thrive on it. Like I think, I my I use the P word instead of the D word, and so the P word for me is purpose, right? Which everyone does
Huh.
differently, but I'm here to. I passionately exist so I can serve, engage, and lead others so they can fully discover and develop what they should be. Like that's kind of
Hmm.
the daily mantra, right? But I think you said something
Hmm.
very key that if I can't do that myself, serve, engage myself, lead myself in all areas. When I say lead myself, that's here, that's in the heart, it's growing all that, right? It's hard for me to do that for others. So when I look at say that's the purpose I'm supposed to go do, if I can't do it for myself, and way I'm gonna do it myself is through discipline, right? Maybe through consistency. Stuff that I'm not the best at too. I'll just say it right now. There's days
Me
where I'm like,
either.
hey,
Me either.
I love a little bit of barbecue. I'll tell you that, but I know that's not
Yes.
always the best for me. I'm actually half grape, so I do drink that
I
red
like the
stuff.
wine.
So it's but I know like I got to make sure I'm working out. I got to make sure I'm reading. For me, I got to make sure I keep praying. There's things I got to do to kind of keep that rhythm. And so we have a lot of it. I have, man, it seems like every day comes about rhythm of like if we don't have rhythms where we're actually in a motion on something, we won't be in motion. We'll actually be going backwards
Mm,
because you either can do life or life will do you. I would say
mm, mm.
so. It's up to you, right? And if you let life do you, it gets pretty hard. It gets very hard because you just I mean, I just told all those curves, right? Those all can go south very quickly, right? And so, but if you put a rhythm in place and you have some discipline around it, maybe you got to give yourself some grace. Like, okay, cool, I didn't get that one, but at least I'm going here. But then I think you have a bigger opportunity to make impact. And I'm not just saying that's not an impact for you; it's for others. Because I think that's a part of. So the biggest thing on the curves is that like we're on the me curve a lot. All these domains, it's about the me. Once you jump and you go to the next one, you start seeing there's a we part, right? And then there's even a curve beyond that that's more of like the you part. How are you helping others, right? So there's a me, a we, and a you, and that's where I think you can get like where every person you talk to that has had really good success, they all say, I'm moving down to significance.
Hmm.
And that's that, okay, I was on my success curve. I crushed it, had an
Hmm.
awesome business, have an awesome family. I've got great things I'm doing in my community. When they jump that next curve, that's where significance start coming to play. Like, how do I take this great thing I did? I had this business I sold, or I had this great family, and now I'm an empty nester. How do I jump that next curve?
Mm.
That's called grandparent, right?
Hmm.
Or that's called nonprofits. There's so many businesses. I look at the leaders I work with in our MSP industry, and it's awesome. Like they're just amazing people. Like some of the brightest, most gifted people, and we keep it here. And I'm like, man, if we could just take one person over and like have them talk, man, you'd be amazed. These people, they would just they're 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 very thankful for what we have, and what we have, we just got to know it's some of us, it's like, okay, this is normal, so we do. It's peer groups and that. But in other peer groups out there, I sat in one a couple weeks ago in Kansas City, and man, I just dropped a couple terms on that we use, and they're like, "How did you know that? Where'd that
Really?
come from?" Oh yeah, why do you use the word EBITDA? What does that mean?
Huh.
What is the emotional intelligence? Why do you what's the word discipline? Why is discipline? What is trust? That's just the rhythm we have, right? Joe, you have that rhythm, you're used to, but that's where I'm like, we got to take what we have and make sure it gets to others.
Does your spirituality, Eric, require a certain level of discipline?
It's interesting. I think it does because I think you have to be very aware. Like I mentioned, Joe, it's pretty big me, right? So I'm like, if I know God's with me all the time, sometimes I'll go through the day and I'll be driving along with, oh, I forgot to ask you about this. I need your help on
Huh.
this right now, and that's for me not being so. But when I have a rhythm where I read the Bible every day, I'm praying, right? I'm in community groups with other people, right? But I'll tell you, Joe, I'm broken. But I had a long ways to go. It's going to take me a lifetime and then some to get it even. But I think you have to have that. And I think it comes down, Joe, and you point this out. If there's something where you value, like your life, right, you're going to make sure you do everything to extend your life,
Hmm.
right? For me, my faith, I value my eternity. There's a long game and a short game mentality. A short game mentality is 90 years.
Huh.
Long game mentality is eternity.
Huh.
We all have different things we value, right? And so in each of those areas, like I do believe, like in my community, if I can go and help people that are living in my community, that my community is going to be, it's going to grow, it's going to become safer, it's going to be more profitable, right? That's why I spend time in my community. Um, but for people that don't, because that's not where they value. So where we value, we have to put discipline in. If we don't, we're actually not, we're not valuing it. We're just kind of paying lip service to it.
Hmm. I make it a point. I want to make sure that I'm not the king of discipline, Eric. Like I'm deeply flawed, right? So
Oh,
I
we
have
all are, but
you
we all.
use the word broken as well. I mean, there's certain areas that I focus more on. There's others that I don't.
Yeah,
I just think I have these two musicians, this duo that I really like. I listen to a lot. I
yeah.
asked them to be on the podcast, and they said,
Oh, cool.
"Well, your show's on this. We are not disciplined. I don't want to be any part of that."
Right.
And I
Yeah.
said, well, there's no wrong answer.
Right. Right.
Discipline, but don't you need a certain level of discipline just to play guitar and the
Yeah.
drums? And
Yeah.
even to
Oh
say
yeah.
that you're not disciplined, isn't there a certain level of discipline
Oh yeah.
in
Yeah. Yeah.
saying,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
so but I can understand how I don't want to force anybody if they're not,
Yeah.
but it's fascinating to me how many different answers I get from that. What motivates you, Eric Townsend?
Oh, well, that purpose I just gave you, right? Serve, engage, and lead others to fully discover and develop what they want to be, right? That's a all day,
Mm.
every day, right? That just gets, and I think it's kind of like I had the really good opportunity one time to meet a swimmer, and he was a really famous swimmer. I'll give you his name at the end, right? And I was speaking at a conference, and he spoke after me. He was actually like in the afternoon session in the morning. And they're like, "Hey, this guy'd love to talk to you." So him and I were in a green room talking, and at first I didn't know who he was, Joe. I was like, talking to my friend, I'm like, "Who's that guy?" He's like, "Oh, dude, that's the swimmer." And I'm like, "Yeah, I think I've met him before." And this dude was he was like 6'3", 6'4", but he had a weird body. He had like his torso was super long, and his legs
Ah.
were. And so he comes up to me, and we're sitting there, and he's like, "Hey, nice to meet you." And he actually has ADD, so it's so weird because he's a big dude, but he's kind of like. And so he's like, "Hey, so what was the crowd like?" And we started talking, and I just said, when you get there, kind of be yourself. Like it's a lot of people, but it's good, and that. And then I said, "Yeah, you've been in the Olympics, haven't you?" And he's like, "Yeah, I've been there, yeah." And I'm like, "Wow." I'm like, "So what?" And I asked the question because I was like, "Dude, from this," I'm like, "So what drove you uh, to be so good at the Olympics?" And he's like, "Well, you just have a way. You just have to. You have to have your mindset where you're going to
Mm,
win,
mm.
um, and that's what you do." And I'm like, "Oh, what do you might win?" He's like, "Well." Like, for example, when I would get up in the morning, because I'm like, well, you can swim. And this guy swam. When I tell you his name, you'll probably have heard of him. He's like, he said that one of the hardest things I went through when I was training for the Olympics was that not a lot of people on other countries outside the U.S. like me too much because I do pretty well. And I was at the University of Michigan. And that's where I train at. And I came out one night and I slipped and fell and I put my hand down. It was because black ice, and I fractured my hand. And I was the first time out of the pool in 10 years. And all these articles started coming. When it got out, Team Canada's like, Phelps isn't going to do this. He's not going to do this, all this stuff, right? And so 10 days, he's like, it was the worst 10 days of my life. I had to basically sit. I had to be in the weight room. I was staring at the pool and I just rode the bike, lifted, right? And my first day back in, my coach is like, he showed me all the articles and he's like, they think you're going to lose. He's like, I need you to prove to me and have a discipline that you're not going to.
Mm.
So and he's like, my training regimen changed 6 months before the Olympics. The whole thing changed because my coach
Wow.
knew the discipline I had to have, and he's like, and that discipline just wasn't in the pool. He's like, every morning when I'd wake up and the alarm went off, I looked over, and there was a pad of paper, and for every one of my races, had the world record splits. And he's like, I could not every time because there were times I did not want to get up, and I'd look over and I'd see those splits, and I'm like, it's like if I don't get up, I ain't gonna hit those world records.
Mm.
And so Michael Phelps, that's the guy.
Yeah.
He's like, and he's super competitive. He was like, but he's like, it's just you have to have something that you bring with you every day that brings you.
Mm.
For the singers, and it may be just that they're going to play in front of people. For me, it's my purpose, right? And I take that across all those domains. And I think like for people right now that may not have, and I use the word consistency, discipline. There's a couple different ones you can use together, right?
Sure.
But I think if you're at that point, you're like, gosh, I'm definitely doing a lot, but I feel like I'm not being in that part. I'm always like, oh,
Mm.
there's there's lots of opportunity, lots of it, right? And they're probably around you people. That's called opportunity, right? And people, that's what we're all about, relationships in those different areas. And I think like it's just being open to it, right? But most people are not because they want to do, get their stuff done, and the B barely gets looked at. So,
Hmm. Hmm. So, given that motivation, Eric, how do you measure success?
well, I want to say like one person at a time, but I think it's
Right.
more of the part of like, uh, did I do my purpose that day? Did I serve, engage, and lead others, or did I serve, engage, lead me? Right? And Joe, I'm like you, right? I got a long ways to go, right?
Yeah.
But luckily I work with great people. Like I'm joining a really cool company soon. Amazing people there. I get to meet with you. I mean, there's my board directors. People are amazing people. Not always the easiest to meet with, but they're definitely.
Mm.
And I've got a great wife. I get to basically, when I look at all those different curves, I could tell you my tomorrow morning at 5 a.m. when we're in the kitchen and they're making pancakes and they're making burritos, right? All that heart that's there and those people leaning in all together, I could measure it off all that goodness that's happening there. Um, but I think I also got to be real, saying that like the more I think about like what I'm doing, I'm getting way off track, right? I got to be like, hey, how am I making sure that the big purpose and what God wants to get done, that gets done? I don't need. I'm well beyond. Like I would say, I'm better than I deserve. Joe,
Mm.
what I have, I'm way better, way better than I deserve. Like I got so much more than I deserve. I mean,
Me too.
yeah, way better.
Me too. You said one person at a time. Reminds me of that story where a big storm happens and
Yeah,
all these starfish, thousands of starfish
yeah,
come up on the beach, and the little kid is getting one and flicking it into the water and picking
yeah,
up another, flicking it in. An older gentleman comes by and he
yeah,
says, "What are you doing? You can't get all these thousands of starfish back in
yeah,
the water." And the kid picks up one and throws it in and goes, "Well, I just helped that one."
yeah,
Just kind of one person at a time.
yeah,
Uh, Eric, I always enjoy our conversations.
yeah.
Thanks so much for doing this. I,
Yeah.
I, I learned so much from you. I love going back and forth in your perspective. Anybody listening, if they want to get in touch with you, would LinkedIn be the best place?
Yeah, and do Eric D Townsend. D is in dog. That'll get to me that way. And then love to have conversations. Like I said, I do all the stuff with the Pattern Center with StratUp and Life Plan. Do stuff in Strength Finder. Do stuff with the Table Group. And so lots of resources I connect you to. Also do a lot of stuff professionally. So if you want to know where I'm at, go look there. But I also should just, I post a lot of things there, and just lots of different, I think there's a lot of people that we can impact all together. So yeah, it's good.
Absolutely. I look forward to getting seeing you at the next event. And one of these days, we're going to get out and play golf. We've been talking about it for 15 years.
Yeah, you got to spot me some shots, a couple maybe. I
No,
don't know.
no
See.
problem. We'll have a
Yeah.
good time. That's for sure. Eric, you be well, my friend.
Thank you, man.
Thank you for listening and or viewing Joey Pin's Discipline Conversations. Please share this episode with one or two of your friends who you think may benefit from the episode. Our website, www.joeypins.com. There you'll find lots of resources and you could join our mailing list. Please follow us on all our social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Podcast information, the video version of our podcast is on YouTube. Please subscribe. Audio is on all major podcasting platforms. Please follow them. And if you like it, please consider giving 5-star rating. Would really appreciate that. Thank you again for listening or watching Joey Pin's Discipline Conversations.